Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard. Thank you for watching today's Corn Belt Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrient Ag Solutions. Well, on Friday morning, we'll start with a look at the radar across the continental United States, the entire lower 48 here. We've got another storm system making its way across the country here. We can see that classic comma shape over the central United States. A warm front extends off to the east from there, which is being the focus for some thunderstorms across Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. Also parts of Wisconsin and Michigan receiving some of that thunderstorm activity. This will continue to move off to the east today, bringing more showers and storms to the area, perhaps some severe weather across parts of Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. That severe weather threat extends down the dry line across parts of the western Corn Belt as well. We'll dive into that in just a moment. Looking at temperatures on Friday morning as well, we can essentially draw that storm system back in there. You got your cold front off to the west. Once again, that warm front extending off to the east into the eastern Corn Belt there. And it's in this area especially that we watch for the repeated rounds of heavy rain producing thunderstorms and the chance for some severe weather. And off to the north, it remains quite cool for this time of year with precipitation chances in that area as well. So continues to be bad news as we head into the weekend for many people here and really continuing on into the early part of next week at the very least. Flood warnings, flash flood warnings, widespread across the central U.S. Again, it's been this very same area, seeing repeated rounds of severe weather, producing heavy rain. Again, the threat for tornadoes, large hail, damaging winds. A very problematic situation across the central U.S. And you can see that here with the last 72 hours of precipitation. Now, what you notice here when you look at really the southern half of this here, when you're talking about parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, you see how the precipitation falls in these streaks, these corridors of heavy rain, and that's because, again, this has been the product of heavy rain producing thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms in many cases here. And that's how we get these swaths, the kind of brushstroke appearance here to the accumulated precipitation. It's these thunderstorms producing very heavy precipitation and often training over the same area. What we mean when we say training is, literally picture a freight train, but imagine each car there is a thunderstorm cell. These cells just continue to go over the exact same places in repeated fashion. And that's how you end up with corridors like this down near the Lubbock area. You can find them all over the place, but this is how we end up with big problems in localized areas here within an overall problematic pattern. We look at the next 5 days of precipitation. This takes us through Tuesday, May 28th. We see the exact same corridor being hit hard by these repeated rounds of storms, and it's the same thing if we go through the next 10 days, really from the southern plains into the central U.S. Now, you're finding precipitation across the entire Corn Belt, really, so there's not a dry place until you head off to the mid-south, I guess. If you want to look for a bright spot here over the next 10 days, it is kind of this area, Kentucky, Tennessee, maybe close to the Ohio River Valley, where perhaps being missed off to the north by some of these repeated rounds of storms, but widespread across the Corn Belt. We're dealing with repeated rounds of rain. It's in this corridor though where it's falling in the form of training thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms. Off to the north, it's a little bit more of a cool rain on the north side of a lot of these storm systems. The next week, week one, GFS precipitation anomalies highlighting the same area there. I'll kind of click through this quickly. You're seeing a lot of the same thing. Week two, this will be May 24th through May 31st, really highlighting the same area, the core of that problem area there from the central plains into the mid-Mississippi Valley. Temperature anomalies for the next 5 days. You can see that area of high pressure over the southeast. That continues with clockwise flow to pump Gulf moisture into the central U.S. We've got a trough over the west, a ridge in the east, and it's ahead of that trough where you expect the active area to be, and that is again the story here. Gulf moisture feeding up from the south and interacting with that jet stream, the repeated development of storm systems over the central United States. We get the heavy rain forming over the central U.S. and then tracking off to the east through the central and the eastern Corn Belt. The week two, or I should say the days 6 through 10 temperature anomalies, a similar picture here, and that's just because we're not seeing a major pattern shift here over the next week at least. Perhaps some changes looming out beyond weeks 2 and 3, but for the next week, which is what we're focused on in some of these regional updates here, really trying to focus on the next 5 days, it is a lot of the same. We'll look at the jet stream here on Friday morning, and there it is, your trough off to the west. Let me change my color here. The trough in the west, the ridge in the east, the clockwise flow around that, pumping Gulf moisture into the central U.S., get your low pressure to develop over the central plains, kicking off thunderstorms that then lift off to the east, northeast. The other factor here, we're getting into the late spring, early summer. Again, with that Gulf moisture feeding up is, seasonally appropriate warmth. and that means plenty of instability for these thunderstorms to work with. Now, something that I want to show off, this is a loop of CAPE, convective available potential energy. That's the fuel that these thunderstorms draw their energy from, and as I go ahead and play this one more time, you can see that they like to form on the outer edges of these, if you want to call it a plume, but these instability plumes. You can actually watch as the instability builds through the days. You see these little flare-ups kind of eat away with it. Look, right there. You see how it kind of, during the peak heating of each day, that's where you see your thunderstorms develop again along this very same area. Let me play it one more time for you and just watch kind of the plumes. Boom. You get through the next day. Boom. Those are your thunderstorms flaring up each afternoon. This stops now at 2 p.m. on Sunday, but if it played all the way out through Sunday evening, you'd see the same thing happening in this very same area. Now, the high-resolution NAM model will take a look at the precipitation loop through the weekend. You see that first storm system moving off to the northeast, bringing more rounds of thunderstorms to the same area from Kansas into the mid-Mississippi Valley. I'll go ahead and click through time on this one if I'm able to do so, which it looks like I lost my opportunity. But it does kind of highlight, again, just kind of the repeat of the same pattern. And by the time we get to the end of this loop, I'll play it one more time for you. Keep your attention off to the southwestern U.S. You see the counterclockwise flow around the next area of low pressure that begins to eject from the southwest over the central plains as we head into next week, bringing a Monday and Tuesday severe weather threat to this area. And with that severe weather threat comes the threat for heavy rain. So here's your next, the same thing, the next 3 days or so of accumulated precipitation, kind of highlighting the same thing. And you're seeing a repeat of the past 72-hour precipitation map that I showed you. These heavy corridors of very heavy rain set up by the repeated rounds of heavy rain producing thunderstorms, kind of training over the same areas. Now, don't take this map for straight fact. This is a computer model's rendering of what it thinks is going to happen over the next 72 hours. Absorb the pattern here, which is, again, repeated rounds of heavy rain over this same area, with the potential for some of these training thunderstorms to produce those corridors of, above 4 to 6 inches of rain in some instances. And this is just terrible news. And again, here's the look at the pattern. It just doesn't change. That trough over the western U.S. as we head through the next week, maybe a subtle shift here. You see this big trough develop over the over off to the northeast, but we're still seeing the development of that other trough off to the southwest. And if I take this out the next 10 days, they kind of want to re-amplify this trough over the western U.S., which would put us right back into a pattern like this, which is why I don't want to promise a change, because we see some subtle suggestions of maybe a shift in the pattern, but it's not a complete flip. And it does look like that as we head into the beginning of June, perhaps flipping back to a similar pattern here where we just continue to eject clusters of thunderstorms from the central plains into the mid-Mississippi Valley. So we'll go ahead and we'll loop the European model, the next 7 days of precipitation here. I'll go ahead and click through time for you so we can kind of step through and just show you the reloading of this pattern. As we start Friday, here's that storm system that I painted for you with thunderstorms developing from the central plains into the Midwest. This does lift off to the northeast as we head into the weekend. We're seeing another wave eject now early next week. That's the one I told you to watch for off to the southwest. We see another area of low pressure develop Monday and Tuesday with more thunderstorms developing there over the same area, Kansas, Nebraska, eastward into the mid-Mississippi Valley. So again, just a reloading of this same pattern where we watch for troughs to develop over the central plains, tracking off to the east-northeast, bringing with it the chance for thunderstorms, training thunderstorms producing heavy rains, and the chance for some severe weather. So straight from the European model, the next 7 days of precipitation highlighting that corridor of very heavy rain from the southern plains into the Midwest. If you look at the GFS model, there are subtle differences between the two, but overall highlighting the same problem area here from the southern plains into the Midwest. Now, obviously, this is problematic. We're talking about planting progress falling well behind average. We're now about the slowest year over the last decade, especially in some of these areas here in the eastern Corn Belt, Illinois through Ohio, South Dakota falling well behind here. That's a product of some of the colder temperatures with some of the rain here. But the other problem emerging now that Erica and I are very concerned is the replant issue in some of these areas where they did make some progress during the early spring, getting planting done, but now are dealing with the heavy rains of thunderstorms that are flooding the fields. And you can take a look at some of the river gauges here across this very same area where we're dealing with near or above flood stages on many of the river gauges here. And I got to tell you, Eric mentioned in the Tuesday update, I'm actually in the plains here, observing some of the severe thunderstorms here, and we passed through, I'll go ahead and mark it on the map, right here in southeastern Kansas, passing by some of these cornfields. I'll go ahead and play it out. Now, this is not a lake. This is a cornfield that should have, crop emerging, sorry there, and instead it looks as if we're driving by a lake here. This video is playing a little bit choppy for me, but along with that here, this was a little bit south of the Corn Belt. This was in the Texas Panhandle yesterday evening, ping pong ball sized hail with some of these severe thunderstorms. So the heavy rains, the large hail, the possibility here, the video is playing, it was playing a little smoother, but the large hailstones. So just, it's a multifaceted problematic problem here as we go through the next few days. And as we look back over the last couple of weeks, just checking in on the severe weather outlooks here, the day one for Friday, we're seeing that severe weather risk today extending from the southern plains into the Midwest. It's a similar look as we head through, honestly, the next 6 days. Here is the Saturday severe weather outlook, perhaps a higher chance of severe thunderstorms producing very large hail and perhaps some isolated tornadoes over southwestern Kansas into the panhandles, but that severe weather risk again extending all the way into the eastern Corn Belt. Same thing as we look at Sunday, and then that Monday and Tuesday outlook, while I don't have the maps in here, highlights the same corridor from the Central Plains into the Midwest Monday and Tuesday. Checking in on the last 30 days of precipitation, percent of normal, this really highlights the problem. You can find a couple corridors in here where it's been okay for parts of eastern Nebraska through parts of Iowa and Wisconsin, where over the last 30 days we're at least are close to normal. Again, I mentioned Kentucky and Tennessee as being possibly a bright spot here that's not getting completely soaked in the Corn Belt, but everywhere else here, you look, is about 200% ahead of normal over the last month with precipitation. We'll finish with the next 5 days of high temperatures. Your Friday high temperatures, you can draw in that storm system again, kind of the cooler air behind there. Not very cold, obviously. We're still in the mid-70s for your high temperatures, but 90s as you head off to the east, parts of Illinois, Indiana, into Kentucky and Tennessee. Rebounding over the Central Plains as we head to the weekend. Here's your Saturday high temperatures, Sunday, Monday, and then we will finish with Tuesday, watching that next storm system come out of the west. That's why we're a bit cooler over here as you head into the far western Corn Belt. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have a look at the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Monday morning ag forecast video, and I'll have your next Corn Belt regional update for you right here midday on Tuesday. Have a great day.